Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us this morning. We are going to have a little bit of a different space this morning. We're going to be talking with Mal and Ryan Smith and Shanoa Summers. They are both two amazing, strong women that I have so much respect for. And I'm really excited to have this conversation. Um, I've been looking forward to talking with both of them together about disability rights, and running for office when you have a disability. So I'm really excited. Good morning, Madeline. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing very well. It is 10 o'clock where I am right now, so this is a little early for me, but I set my alarm this morning so I could be here this morning. And that's the beauty of being a business owner, is that my workday can start at 2 o'clock if I decide so.
Right?
So- But yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be talking about this. And that's one thing that I love about these spaces, that I feel like it's not my only avenue to talk about disability, because I talk about disability all the time, but it is something that I think has come into the light a little bit more, I would say, in the last calendar year or so. I think people are finally, after America has been a country since 1776, Americans are just now figuring out that disability is something that we might want to be paying attention to just a little bit.
Right.
So so it's exciting. We're making progress here. So it's good.
Yeah. And I feel like, with COVID, and a lot of people experiencing long COVID and the symptoms from that, we are seeing the disability population rise, and I'm crossing my fingers that that means we'll see more we'll see more things happening with politics and with legislation coming through, because we've talked about this a lot. The ADA is really the bare minimum, and there's so much more that needs to be done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know that, here we're talking about disabilities and campaigns, and I've talked a lot about, a lot of the words that come out of my mouth are, we need more disabled people to run for office. We need more representation. Da, da, da. And that's really easy to say, exponentially more difficult to actually do. So,
Right.
it's just one of those things where, like, we need more representation in a lot of facets in our government. Disability is one that we desperately need, like yesterday. We needed it last year for sure. We needed it 5 years ago. But we have created a system in our country where running for office and holding these leadership positions and having the money to run for office and stuff like that is completely classist. It's completely based on the ability to have money. Most people who run for office, I don't know if anybody has noticed, but at least in my area, a lot of people are retired. They don't have jobs that they have to go to 9 to 5. That makes it easier to run for office. They're totally able-bodied. They're white. They're male. They have name recognition because they spent 40 years as a pharmacist, which is what my opponent has been doing, etc. So, I try to always be conscious of, as many times as I say we need more disabled people to run for office, I also have to recognize that that's not realistically something that somebody with a disability can do often. And I think that uh, the oppression Olympics can be seen here quite heavily when we talk about which disabilities have an easier time running for office. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but I I think I personally believe that I have disabled privilege, which means that due to my disability, I actually have more privileges than I would, you know, we think of blindness as being this totally debilitating thing where your life is hard, you're not going to get as many opportunities, et cetera, which is very true. However, in the very specific instance of running for political office, I think a blind person would have an easier time doing that than someone in a wheelchair, or someone who is hard of hearing, or someone with a developmental disability, or someone with Down syndrome. And a lot of that is because people suck, because people
Right.
are more likely to vote a blind person into office than they are someone with Down syndrome. And that is because of ableism. So,
That's completely right. That's completely right. I'm glad that you brought that up. Good morning, Shanoa. How are you?
Hi, I finally figured out how to get on.
It can be tricky sometimes.
But yeah, I would totally agree with Madeline. As far as disabled people running for office. It- so disabled people make up roughly 25%, a quarter of the population. But there's hardly any representation. So those of us that are um, able to should run so we get more representation, so we have the voices that can speak up for us. And I think I'm on the other side of the spectrum because I have mobility issues. I don't have a wheelchair or anything like that, but um, it made it hard for me last year when I was campaigning, because it was so hard for me to get out and knock on doors because of my back issues.
Right.
I
Yeah.
hear that too. I had door to door canvassing is literally not something we did the first time I ran. I That was mainly because my campaign team was consisting of many young women, and I just did not think that was necessarily safe all the time. But also, like, if I want to go canvassing, I have to walk. I literally am not legally able to drive a car. I am blind. So, like, getting from point A to point B, going door to door, traveling all these neighborhoods, getting, 100 doors knocked in a day is a big ask for someone who cannot see. So, yeah, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the way I made up for it was I did a ton of phone banking. I was pretty much on the phone all day long.
Yeah. I was just about to say that. That's what we did with Madeline last year. We did a lot of phone banking and text banking. And um, honestly, just after COVID though, too, I think that really changed how people campaign. And being able to do those things, sending more emails, sending the texts, and having those phone calls, and those conversations over the phone became more of a norm. And also, like Madeline pointed out, it's not always safe to just walk up to somebody's door, especially we see what has happened lately in the news with people going to the wrong house and things like that. So I definitely kind of see a change and a shift in the way that candidates will be campaigning going forward, and I think being able to do that is awesome. I don't answer my door ever. If I'm not expecting anybody to come over to my house, then you're just going to stand at the door ringing my doorbell and knocking. I'm not answering it. So, but if somebody texts me, I can read the text and then I'll reply to it. I feel like we'll get more of a response doing that than somebody showing up at your door. Not to say that it doesn't help, but that's just my personal opinion. I'll answer a text before I answer my front door.
Well, and I also think that there's something to say about how COVID itself, regardless of disability, if we totally take that out of the equation, COVID changed the way we do stuff
Yeah.
just across the board. So to think as a political organizer that COVID had absolutely no effect on how you're supposed to campaign as a candidate, if you really think that COVID had no effect on that, you do not need to be running for office. Like,
Right.
that's just common sense. That's basic sociology. Come on. And it's just one of those things that it's a little bit of a silver lining because we did put long COVID underneath the ADA, so that is a protected disability. However, that has completely changed the way we have to campaign, and we have not really figured out what the right way to do it is yet, because we're still, I mean, COVID is still happening. We still have people contracting COVID and dying from COVID every single day. So that is something that I think the disability community is fighting on both fronts right now, because COVID is something that politically, societally, we've all been paying a lot of attention to, but it's not going away. But we have leadership on both sides of the aisle saying that, oh, COVID's over. And it's not over for the disabled community. I would say halfway through, maybe, hopefully, I don't know, but it's the disabled community has we have a lot to that has been left to be desired from both sides of the aisle as far as disability awareness policy, education, everything goes. And that is a huge reason why, like when I see Democratic candidates that are crazy ableist and don't know anything about disability, how progressive are you really? How much of a Democrat are you really? If you have no clue how to talk to or interact with people with disabilities. I mean, you're uneducated at best. And if you are going to walk around and discriminate against a quarter of the population in the country, then do you really need to be in a leadership position? I would argue a hard no. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. When I was talking with Steve after learning about the Rural Caucus and wanting to get involved, he asked me, what do you want to see as far as candidates? And I told him I want to see more women of color and I want to see more people with disabilities, but specifically women. Um, I want to see women in office. Definitely. We need more women in positions of power, but who better than to represent their communities and people that know exactly what the challenges would be and how to advocate best for everybody in the community, um, than somebody with a disability that has experienced that ableism, that has to overcome all of these obstacles that our society just not knowledgeable to, not aware of. Um, and I definitely think having more women in positions of power, women with disabilities that have that lived experience can help make those changes. And, to have legislation written by people that are able-bodied, how well can that work if it's not something that they have experienced firsthand? So I definitely
Um,
am right there with you guys. Um, so through campaigning, because you were both campaigning last year, what did you notice as far as ableism while you were campaigning?
Oh, well,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
well, the ableism that I experienced was very public. It came from not only the other side, Republicans, but also from within my own party, um, the Democratic Party. And I'm going to begin by calling out Dan Whitfield because that's when it really started. Um, it might have been like May of last year, April or May of last year. But what had happened was me and Dan Whitfield were at the same event, and we were talking to a constituent, and he was constantly talking over me. And he took that as me not being mentally capable of doing the job of state senator. Now, if you know who Dan Whitfield is, he has been running for U.S. Senator here in Arkansas since 2016. And so for a candidate for U.S. Senator to outright call another Democratic candidate who's not running in the same race mentally incapable, that's just appalling, and it shouldn't have happened. And he never apologized for it. And in fact, he doubled down and he kept calling me mentally incapable, mentally unfit. Um, and he knew I had disabilities. I have both physical and mental disabilities, but they don't affect, my. I, I lead a normal life for the most part. I mean, I need things to be accessible to me, but like it's not going to prevent me from doing a good job at the state legislature.
That makes me angry for you. Just I wouldn't even know how to respond to that. I'd be like, okay, if I'm mentally incapable, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, what does that make you? Like, it's like let's do some introspection for a moment and just reflect. Like,
I know.
That doesn't even make sense.
I know, and it just highlights that ableism. So Democrats are not immune from ableism, and we must point it out. We must call people out for their ableist rhetoric, and we must correct it. You have to be willing to acknowledge you made a mistake and apologize. Like, it's not really that hard, you know.
No, I agree. And what I think what has bothered me a lot recently, and I feel like this is just the people that I choose to hang around. I have been told to my face multiple times in my life that ableism does not exist. And this is a very biased opinion, but I have been told to my face before by an able bodied woman of color that being a Black woman in America is harder than being blind. And I'm just like, well, I think those are very different issues. I don't know how you could possibly relate to my level of blindness, sighted person, but okay. And then the entire concept of ableism doesn't exist. Where the hell did that come from? I mean, ableism as a definition, I mean, you can't deny that that happens in America. I mean, we watch it happen with our own eyes in real time. So it's just amazing to me that there's so much, I guess it's not even misinformation, it's just disinformation that disabled people in America have all these rights and that the ADA is like this band-aid that fixes everything and Social Security is making us rich with our with our six-digit salaries every month and everything. And it's like, no, actually, we get the shortest end of the stick in every opportunity available, including employment, healthcare, education, pay, marriage equality, etc. Access to everything. So it it just is a hill that I actively choose to die on, but it is a hill that is worth climbing, I think, as far as disability awareness goes. But I think we still have a lot of work to do, aside from politics, just getting Americans to understand that being disabled in this country is not easy. It's not cheap. It's not exciting. It's not fun. It's quite literally an uphill battle with zero help coming. So, yeah.
I agree. I'm sorry. I added some messages that I had from Dan Whitfield to the Nest, and I was just adding in the alt text for it. Please let me know if you guys are able to see that. But it's up in the Nest, and that is regarding what Shanoa was saying that she had experienced. And just reading those messages it's horrifying that these are comments coming from anybody, but much less somebody that wants to represent um, the state, which encompasses people with disabilities, especially during, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So these are things that I don't know. I my mind is blown, honestly, by this, and I know that we see this a lot, especially on social media, but just out in the public. And my only thought is, to educate others about living with a disability. And I think a lot of people, either they're not around people with disabilities, they don't have that experience, but just opening yourself up to learning more and how you cannot be ableist and how you can actually be helpful instead would be just amazing. But yeah, my I can't even think right now after reading those again. It's
Yeah.
just
that that whole time, like, I was able to keep my mouth shut. And a lot of my supporters jumped on top of him. I believe that first screenshot you have there, he deleted it because so many people jumped on him for saying that and called him out for being ableist and sexist. Uh,
right.
Yeah, I searched on his Twitter this morning for that tweet, couldn't find it. I was about to go ham.
so some of the comments he made about me are on his Facebook page, and I believe those are still up.
Glorious. That's all I needed to know. But yeah, it's and that's one thing that I think is a lot of cause for the gatekeeping we see around the disabled community, which is necessary and needed sometimes, gatekeeping. My happiest moments in my life are when I'm surrounded by other people with disabilities because I don't have to worry about being discriminated against. And that is kind of why our community, I think, for the most part, isolates ourselves in our disabled bubble because that is where we are safest and that's where we know we're safest. And that is in every facet of society. You'll see that among any demographic, just the gatekeeping of disability culture and just being involved in that community. You kind of have to be invited as an able-bodied person to really be somebody who's super involved in disabled culture. But I think that we have only gotten to that area because able-bodied people have been shutting us away and isolating us without consent for hundreds of years. And so the moment the moment in the 90s where we had all these capabilities of getting into places in public and in society where we weren't ordinarily able to get to, that isolation mindset, I don't think ever really went away because ableism didn't go away. We had all these legal rights and stuff that were laws that people had to follow, but the mindset didn't change. Ableism didn't go away because the ADA got signed. And I think that we are still very much fighting that battle today in politics and in every other facet of society. So it's just people like Dan, they'll learn. It's okay. They're either going to become disabled or die in life. One's going to happen before the other. So we'll see.
Right. Right. Yeah. I don't know what it is about Dan's in this state. Dan Whitfield and Dan Sullivan. Um, yeah. So Madeline has a podcast, Dis Politics, and we have it every Thursday evening. Last night we talked about law enforcement and disabilities. The week before, or 2 weeks before that, we had talked about the prison system and disabilities. And next week we're talking about reproductive rights and disabilities. And so we're talking about just the different ways that politics and disabilities can be influenced, and how it really just shows how much is needed and how much we're lacking with policy when it comes to the disabled community. And it's an eye opener. Last night we talked about the law enforcement and the amount of people with disabilities that are they're just not they're overrepresented in prisons, but with law enforcement, how there's a lack of knowledge of how to approach somebody with a disability, especially, even when we talk about mental health, somebody that's having a, a mental break. And there's so much. And the only way I can really see us making any changes is to have people that are knowledgeable in these areas creating that legislation and
Oh yeah.
educating.
Oh yeah. And I that's pretty much the consensus with the larger community is that's why we have nothing about us without us, right? That's the saying that we say. And that really we saw our first seat at the table happen with Judy Human. And Judy Human, who, for those of us that don't know, is the mother of the disability civil rights movement in America. She is the biggest activist we had up until she left us this year. She has passed away, but her legacy lives on. And that is something that we always talk about is nothing about us without us, having a seat at the table. The only people who are going to be able to properly and successfully cover people with disabilities, Americans with disabilities, and all the rights that they will need are Americans with disabilities. That is the only people you can go to for accurate information about what we need, what we want, when we want it, and how we want it. And that is one thing that I think that the medical world, I think, fuzzes for us just a little bit, is that people, when I say people, I mean able-bodied people, the general consensus, when we talk about disability and mental illness, especially, we listen to clinicians, we listen to doctors and professionals and people like that. And I would say 8 out of 10 disabled people that you talk to will have something negative to say about their doctor. I mean, it's frustrating. It's frustrating when you have a rare disease or this thing that can't be cured or something that doesn't have medication. Like my eye disease is something that I was born with, can't be cured. There's no surgery, there's no medication, there's no nothing. I'm just going to go blind. And the amount of doctors and medical professionals and clinicians that seem to know everything there is to know about blind culture but actually don't is excessive. So that is one thing that we always educate on. And when I say we, I mean the disabled community, is that lived experience, storytelling, personal, case studies, if you will. So, people's personal experiences in life surrounding disability is the best way you can learn about disability. Not listening to the doctors because they don't really know. They're still able bodied people that just regurgitate what they're taught. But with a disabled person, they're giving you their unique experience as a disabled person in their real life with real barriers and real problems that need real solutions. So, especially when we talk about Mental Health Awareness Month in May, it's really great to do a little post about self care and call your friends. That's not helpful. That is not helpful. That is what every single psychologist is doing this month. That is what every single mental health awareness organization is doing this month. If we as individuals really want to educate on mental health, disability, and all of the things that go into those subjects, we need to stop being surface level about them. We need to reach a little bit deeper than that. And just to give an example, like we'll have the mental health posts that are like self care, call your friends. In Georgia, in the disability community, we are using Mental Health Awareness Month to talk about filicide, which is something that happens often in our community, which is the act of a parent killing their child. That happens when we ignore mental health. And so that's something that we're talking about in Georgia this month because that's not surface level, that's deep. That's a very important topic, that's very heavy, but it's something that needs to be talked about and needs to have attention brought to it. So this is kind of off topic, but my main PSA that I always share is that if we're going to be allies, we need to not be surface level allies. We need to not necessarily be allies and start being accomplices. And that's really what we need to start doing. So that's all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we had done a space together. Um, I believe it was in March. Everything kind of runs together now, but I believe it was in March. And um, we had a night of mourning, and we talked about different cases there in Georgia where somebody with a disability was murdered by their caregiver or their parent, and there is a lack, and we see it across the board, just overall nationwide. There's a lack of mental health care in our country. There's a lack of health care in our country, but especially when you have these extenuating circumstances where you have a parent or a caregiver that is taking care of somebody and they don't have the resources, the healthcare resources, but also the mental health care resources for them. And then you talk about finances and the lack of financial support that is given. And all of that just compounds into a lot. And there are ways that we could keep this from happening. There are ways that we could help. But for whatever reason, and I think that reason is that we don't have people that are um, aware of these issues. Um, we don't have that. We don't have that support. So again, having people in office that are knowledgeable about all of the issues that are affected by people with disabilities and their families, we could help create systems that empower each other, empower our communities, and help. Um, there was an article that I'm going to share that up in the nest. It is a New York Post article, and then there's a tweet I'm going to also share up in the nest that somebody had shared. And the more I see this video, and it's of Chris Hines, Denver City Council member, was going to a debate. And for, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the fact that he is in a wheelchair and the people that held this event, organized this event, didn't think to make accommodations for this debate, and he has to crawl up onto the stage, is just dehumanizing. It's beyond what I can't even imagine, whether if it was done intentionally, this just is horrible, and I have words that I cannot use here for those people. Um, but if it was done because they didn't think, I mean, that's just as bad in my opinion. We should be aware of who we are inviting and making sure that it is accessible to everybody. And the fact that it was overseen is just extremely frustrating, extremely angering, and it happens every day, every day. So we see a man that is involved in his community, that is running for office, that wants to make a difference, that would be great to have an office because he could advocate and represent the disabled people in his community. And he is not even given the bare minimum of just being a thought of, let's make sure this debate that we are holding is accessible to the people that we are inviting. So if you guys want to check that out, it's up in the nest.
I
It's also
agree.
in the cat.
That was equally frustrating for me to see. Am I surprised? No. But it's God. I don't even know what I would do if I was sitting in that room and saw that unfold. I I would like to believe that it was not done on purpose. I also wouldn't put it past people to do something like that. However, forgetting about how to get from point A to point B, that happens often, especially when we talk about like events with stages. I mean, how many like stages do you see that have ramps, from the audience up to the stage? And
Oh,
that's just something we don't even think about because why would we? And it's what bothered me the most about that entire situation is that regardless of the preliminary planning, like maybe somebody forgot the fact that, he was a wheelchair user and was coming, oops, sorry, my bad. Let's figure out a solution here. That should have been a concern the moment that man walked into the room. The
right,
moment somebody saw him arrive to the venue in his wheelchair, they should have said, "Oh crap, how is he going to get on the stage?" Because that's something I think about often. I mean, I personally have a friend in my life that I, you know, spend time with and go to events with, and she is a wheelchair user. And the first thing I think about is not even my own accessibility, is how is this person going to get where we're needing to go in her wheelchair? Because my friend, who is a wheelchair user, she can't. She's a permanent wheelchair user. She's not ambulatory, so she can't just stand up and walk a couple of places. Like she is paralyzed from the waist down permanently. So that is not something that we would be able to navigate easily. And I, I just it's I would shit a brick. So
right,
like I just I don't even know how I would respond to that. I would start seeing red and I would start just raging. It just the lack of it's not even knowledge. It's just lack of common awareness. Just open your eyes. I mean, it's logic. You see a man in a wheelchair, you see a stage with no ramp. How is he going to get up there? I don't know. I mean, it doesn't take an adult to figure that out. I mean, I feel like I know some middle schoolers who would be able to figure out a problem like that. So it's just it's amazing to me. It's just amazing. And I find myself just laughing and shaking my head at many things now involving disability and ableism and access because it's just like sometimes you can't fix stupid, you can just tolerate it. And sometimes that's where I'm at, you know?
And it's just willful ignorance as well. I would have been raging as well. I would have been running my mouth. Probably would have gotten kicked out of the venue. So yeah, that is just incredibly sad. Um, but somebody's got to stick up for people with disabilities, and that's the thing. We need to have somebody there who understands the challenges of, either being a wheelchair user, or not having the best mobility, or sight and hearing issues. And of course, I'm a educator, so I have to think about those things in case I have a blind or deaf student. I have to make sure that all of the information I provide is accessible to everybody, regardless of disability. And that's something that should be done in campaigns as well, at the very least. And I'm going to give a shout out to my buddy David McAvoy, because he is trying his hardest to make sure that all of his campaign materials on social media is accessible using alt text. So, yay!
OMG. Okay, well, speaking of, I actually own a digital marketing agency that specializes in digital accessibility, and we work specifically with Democratic candidates. So if he needs an agency to help him, let me know.
I'll definitely pass that
But
along, because he was
yeah,
struggling
my
to.
company is called Blind Bear Creative
Okay.
BBC. So yeah, we have a website, blindbearcreative.com, and our services are really, really affordable. So just let us know
Yeah.
if you guys need help. But yeah, and it's digital accessibility on that topic is so important. I mean, I think that I've got, well, I don't think I know that I've gotten really frustrated with weirdly Gen Z candidates, like people my age, because I'm only 25. And so we get our Gen Zs running for office, the kids that are that are aspiring to be leaders, and none of their ish is accessible. And some of these kids decide to put like white text on a yellow background. And I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, it's just, did you not think to ask anyone? And I offer help. I've offered help all the time. Like, hey, I'm blind. I know how to write alt text. I can tell you if it's accessible or not. Let me look at your website. Let me design a logo for you, because, that's my job that I do. And no response. No one ever wants help. No one ever wants to triple check. But I really think it's because people don't want to be called out for not being accessible. They're just scared that they're not. And so, but it's just one of those things that you would think out of all people that Democratic candidates that label themselves as progressive liberal individuals would think about accessibility when they put stuff out. But none of them seem to, and it's astonishing.
It really is. It really is. It's something I've definitely noticed a lot lately. And you brought up a good point. I think that's right. People are scared to ask for help because they don't want to know that they're not accessible. But again, you are excluding 25% of the population. And as soon as somebody with a disability notices that, they're not they're not going to even give you the time of day afterwards. They're just going to write you off completely because you have made it known that you're not keeping them in mind. You are not going forward with their population, their community in your head at all. So I definitely
Oh,
think that
yeah.
that is needed so much.
And I would even add to that, like, not only do you get discounted, you get talked about. Like, the disability community is vast and large and diverse, don't get me wrong, but we also talk. And big companies that we see, even small companies, Goodwill, I'm looking at you. If you're a company that's ableist and you don't serve the population like you're supposed to, or even worse, if you're like blatantly ableist, either as an individual or a company, you will get ostracized from our community. You will not get our business, and you will get talked about within the community. And forever. I mean, every time anybody says, "Hey, do you want to go to Goodwill?" Not really. They hold a 14C certificate and pay their people sub minimum wage. I'm really not trying to spend my money there. So, like, not only do I clearly not like Goodwill, I will also give you the why of why I don't shop there, and I'll make sure you know why. And so, the 5 friends that I've told, hey, don't shop at Goodwill, that's 6 people that they've lost business of. And
Right.
so that's I think I would not say that's unique to the disabled, but that's the only minority group really, other than being a woman, part of. So I can't speak for other groups, but that is one thing that I do really kind of enjoy about the disabled community, is that if there is a place or a person or a company or something that's totally inaccessible and ableist, yeah, the whole community is going to know. So that's nice, because you just, I really think that we do that to avoid other people getting discriminated against, because if I walk into somewhere and I'm completely denied access, I'm not going to suggest for my friend to go there too. So it's just,
Exactly.
it's an easy way to avoid potential discrimination by proactively knowing who's ableist and who's not. So yeah.
Exactly. And I want to get to Ray real quick, but after I would, if you and Snow are up for it, I know we talked about, we wanted to talk about disabilities and campaigning, but I would really love for us to talk about sub minimum wage as well, because that's a pretty hot topic. Hey, Ray.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Madeline. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Sorry, my mic was muted.
Oh, that's okay. Number one, um, I find your story very inspiring. Um, Going from when you were explaining the other day in Coffee with Democrats, you know, leading up to your campaign and going through school and everything like that, inspiring to, present day today, and being a campaign, to try to make the world a better place, um, for other people that are disabled and for the Gen Z population. Um, One question that I wanted to ask, um, for other people in the Gen Z, um, that want to run, what is the one topic most important that you would suggest that they run on?
Ooh,
If you had to pick one.
if I had to pick one, young people, well, that we care about social issues a little bit more than normal. I would
Yes.
say that it's in between LGBTQ rights
Hmm.
and racial justice, I would say, because reproductive health, that's still a little bit on the fence with, some
Right.
young people who have a strong background in religion are going to be pro-life, which is religious belief, you go do that. But
Okay.
I would say that LGBTQ rights, especially in Georgia, I mean, young people are pissed off right now in Georgia. And yeah, I'm very excited for Pride Month. That's all I'll say about
Oh, I
that.
can't wait. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
But yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I would say that those are, if I had to pick one, I would say probably people pay a little bit more attention to racial issues in my areas right now, just because we have Cop City going on in Atlanta and everything going
Yes.
on with the cities and shootings and blah 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 blah. But that does not put LGBTQ rights on the back burner. I would say that they're equally talked about among young people right now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I thought that was a great question. That was a great question. I want to ask Genoa the same question, but not just for Gen Z. I'm a millennial, so I would like to know, even for millennial or Gen Z candidates, Gen X candidates, um, what would you like to see them focus on?
So I would like to see the focus back on COVID and how it's transmitted via the air and that it's not going away. Um, so when I ran my campaign last year, I refused to actually have like any indoor events. I did have like postcard writing parties at a local restaurant, but we were pretty much secluded and we all had our masks on. But I would just like to see the focus back on how COVID is limiting a lot of disabled people. So making sure that you're wearing a mask in public, making sure that you're speaking out about the risks of COVID and the fact that it's not going away. And I'm a millennial as well, a middle millennial, although I feel very geriatric nowadays. Um, but but yeah, that's my take on that question.
I love that. And you're right. I did see some graphs recently. I think it was about a week ago that were showing that the rates of COVID were coming back here in Arkansas. They were rising a lot more, and they were allowing people to get a booster sooner than they were told before because of the rate of transmission. Um, I definitely think that a lot of people have kind of pushed it back and aren't thinking about it, but we have a lot of people in our communities that are immunocompromised, and we have to be thinking about them. I'm glad that you're doing that. Hey, Ring.
Hey, Kelly, you can call me April, man.
Okay. I didn't know.
Yeah,
I
no,
didn't
that's
know.
okay. That's okay. Pretty much everybody knows my name now, so it's all cool. um, this is actually a question for both Madeline and Shanoa. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. Kelly will know, and Ray will attest, I'm very forefront on the reproductive rights of women, and one of the arguments that I am coming up against with from the pro-life side is they are saying that abortion is ableist. And I, as an able-bodied person, do not know how to counter that argument. And I know you're laughing because in my brain that doesn't make sense.
Oh, it doesn't. No, I'm so glad you brought this
so
up.
like
I'm so glad you brought it up.
I think, like, I know I could call you in, but I'm in so many threads, and the way that they treat people, I don't like putting people, that they have to deal with that. But I don't know how to counter that argument, and I would really love to know how to counter that.
Okay, I will answer first just because so last year when Dobbs' decision went through, Georgia passed their heartbeat bill, and we organized in my city. We had two protests at our courthouse that summer, and one of my speeches involved that exact topic. I talked about how abortion is often seen as ableist, and my underlying message is that it is not abortion that kills the disabled community. It is the ableist idea that disabled people don't belong in this world that kills us. It is the weaponization of abortion that kills people with disabilities. It is the doctor that suggests to the woman who's pregnant with a baby that may have a risk of something going on. And the first thing that they suggest is termination. That's ableist. It's the moms in your mom group that don't invite you to things because your kid has Down syndrome. That's ableist. Abortion is actually something that is needed and necessary for anyone with a uterus with a disability. There is a laundry list of disabilities in this world that if a person with a uterus carried a baby to term with that disability or condition, they would die. They would die. That's just a fact. There's all kinds of reasons a person with a disability would have a very, very high risk pregnancy. So I would argue that abortion is a person with a disability's almost, I would say, largest tool in their tool belt that they have to protect themselves against unwanted pregnancy and death. I mean, I cannot imagine as a disabled woman. Well, I can because I don't have access to it right now. But in a world where, let's say, abortion in Georgia was completely off the table, you could not get it no matter what your condition. I cannot imagine living in a world where women are put under those conditions with disabilities. And aside from just the permanent disabilities we think of, women who are going through cancer treatment. Hello, wouldn't they want to be able to terminate their pregnancy while they're going through radiation? I would say yes. We have a whole slew. I mean, the list goes on. And then the catch 22, the biggest issue with this whole argument that I have is that able-bodied people in America don't think that disabled women should have access to abortion. But the last time I checked, over 70% of America tells me that as a blind woman, I'm not capable of being a parent. So what the hell? Which is it? Which is it?
It's very
Should I
confusing to
not
me.
have access to abortion? Right, exactly, exactly. It is very confusing because people don't know what the hell they're talking about. So, which is it? Is it that I shouldn't have access to abortion because that's ableist? Or am I not allowed to be a parent because I'm disabled? Which is it? Because you can't have
Yeah.
both. And that's where we're at right now. So thank you for bringing this up. That is that's such a trigger topic for me. I could write a book about that. But it is, bottom line, it is the weaponization of abortion that is ableist, not the abortion itself.
Thank you, Madeline.
So.
I figured I would ask you guys because I don't want to be that person that's speaking for another community. So
Oh yeah, dude, drop my name. Be like, look, I know the Disability Caucus chair of the Democratic Party of Georgia, and she said, and yeah,
okay,
just throw me under the bus. It's
not a
fine.
problem. I throw myself under the bus all the time. So we'll party under there.
And I would like to kind of piggyback off of what Madeline said, because I think we could make the argument that lack of access to abortion is ableist in itself. Using the example that you just mentioned, a cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy or radiation, they would have to stop that treatment and potentially risk having the cancer start growing again just to carry a fetus to term. Or so I have PCOS. So if for whatever reason, they had to do a hysterectomy or anything else related to abortion, like that's accessibility for me, to improve my quality of life. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective on it.
Thank you so much, and I'll also let the two of you know. I make it very clear, and it sounds so ridiculous when I say it, but it's so true. Being in Canada, I argue from an abortion privilege standpoint, and I really do. And what's going on with down there, it hurts my heart, and I'm sorry, ladies. I am really sorry.
Well, we're happy for you that you have access up there in Canada. So y'all just keep your borders open. Y'all keep accepting asylum seekers, and we'll be a-okay.
I think that was an excellent question, April. Thank you for asking that. That was amazing. Um, and April is just phenomenal. I see her on Twitter all the time, just standing up for women, and she is right in there with the facts and trying to educate people, but afraid of, she is not afraid of getting down and dirty if she has to. She is definitely a fighter. And the fact that she's in Canada and she is fighting so hard for us down here, she's just an amazing person. Thank you,
Thank you,
April.
Kelly.
We do appreciate it. But we do have a few more minutes. I don't know if you ladies want to stay longer. I am totally able to if you are. I know that I would love to talk a little bit about sub minimum wage. Madeline, you mentioned, Goodwill earlier and the different organizations. And if you could just talk a little bit more about that, because I don't think it's very well known. I hadn't heard of that. It's
14C certificate.
14C certificate. I hadn't heard of that before. You had mentioned it, but I had heard of sub minimum wage. And if you could just kind of expand a little bit more about that, I would love it.
Yes. So sub minimum wage is something that is federally established with our Fair Labor Act, I believe, is what it's called. But it was a labor act that was signed in the 1920s. And that is what's established our ability to pay sub minimum wage. And essentially, what you have to do as a company owner is go to the federal government and say, hey, I'm a company owner. I'd like a 14C certificate. And what that allows you to do is pay individuals that you employ with disabilities less than some sub minimum wage, with the logic of this person with a disability is less capable of doing this job. Therefore, I, as a business owner, can pay them less because I'm having to overcompensate for their accommodations, etc. And obviously, that sounds really ableist because it is. And sub minimum wage is something that we uh, are still trying to get away from. We've been trying to get away from forever. It's still a federally mandated piece of legislation. However, we have seen individual states do away with sub minimum wage, where they'll establish state legislation that includes a minimum wage for their state that also encompasses people with disabilities, which is fine. However, you see a lot of red states, Republican led states, Georgia is one of them, that have not gone away with sub minimum wage. So you can actually go online, and if you just Google like United States government 14C certificates, you will find a government webpage with a database with a list of every single company in the United States that currently holds a 14C certificate. You can see when they got it, when they applied for it, when they were awarded it. You can see how many people they currently have being paid sub minimum wage. And the shocking part of it all is that the majority of this list are companies that are either nonprofits or companies that serve the population of people with disabilities. You see a lot of centers of independent living on there. You see a lot of like developmental disability, autism awareness, Down syndrome organizations that have 14C certificates. Goodwill is one of them. But yeah, you can look it up. You can search companies by name. And what's weird too is that you'll also see a lot of companies that have these certificates but are currently paying zero people sub minimum wage. So it's like, why do you have this? Like, if you're not actually using it, why the hell have it? Because it makes you look dumb, and it's just I will never understand. And the flip side of that coin is that we have self-proclaimed allies, which are usually parents of adults with disabilities, that actually perpetuate sub-minimum wage, which is very confusing to me. But that just kind of side topic goes to show that just because you're a parent of a child with a disability does not make you an automatic ally. Sometimes that makes you automatically ableist. So uh, yeah, sub minimum wage is bad. And if you want to look into your own state to see if your state allows sub minimum wage, you can do that. And you can write to your legislator about why sub minimum wage is bad and why we should not continue allowing people in the United States to be paid as little as $2 an hour to do the same work as their able bodied coworkers. It's ridiculous. So, yes, that's the minimum wage. There you are.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Chanel, we have sub minimum wage here in Arkansas, and that is something that I would love to see go away. Um, it's it blows my mind that anybody ever thought that that was okay, but, you know, it was written, Madeline, you said in the 20s, 1920s, so
Oh, yeah, and, in the 20s, we in the 20s, Jesus, I would not want to live in the 20s as a blind
right,
woman, that's all I can say.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's we've come a long way, as a country since then, but the fact that it's still a thing, is not okay for me. And you brought up parents. My child's disabled, and I can't imagine. There was an article that you had shared a few weeks ago here on Twitter about a person with a disability, and his mother was advocating for him to continue being paid 25 cents an envelope. He was stuffing envelopes, and of course, they interviewed the business owner, and he was, of course, all for it because 25 cents per envelope. But the parent, and that just it angered me in my, like, soul. It was just infuriating to see a parent advocating for their child to be stuck in this system, and not being paid a fair wage. What happens, I always look at what would happen to my child when I'm gone. I want my child to have all of the tools right at their fingertips, and have all of that knowledge and everything that they need. And I couldn't imagine being okay with that. So that was just, as a parent, extremely frustrating to see. We've we've got to do better, and I would love, just here in Arkansas, to see. I know we do have the Disability Rights of Arkansas. I would love to see something within the Democratic Party, um, a caucus or something. And we had talked about that a little bit, Shanoa, and then Madeline, you and I talked about that a little bit earlier this week. I don't know what it takes to start a caucus. I don't know if I am able to even do that, but I would love to find somebody and support them and see if we could get something going, like that here, because we need that. And I think it's a nonpartisan issue, because people are disabled on all, whether you're, whatever your political party is, whatever your political affiliation is. So creating something that helps everybody is so very much needed, and I would love to see that happen. Um, I really just want to thank you both for coming this morning. Disability rights are important to me, Madeline and Shanoa. I know that they are so important to you both, and I am in awe that you are both such strong women that are running for office, that are getting involved and making a difference, and I love to see that so much. I think I would love to have this, like, as a regular thing. If we could do this regularly, I would love that. If you both are up for it, uh, these conversations are needed.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I actually, while you were talking, I put that article about some minimum wage up in the Nest, which was just shocking. It was on CBS News, and the headline was just bad. Anyway,
Yeah,
um,
that was horrible.
I still sometimes I have to laugh at this stuff because like if you don't laugh, you'll cry, and it's just like, oh my God, it just what else? What else is there?
Yeah,
And but yeah, anyway. But starting a disability caucus, honestly, you need to find your version of Vinny in Arkansas. You need to find
right.
your vice chair of constituency groups in your party and be like, hey, we want to start our caucus. Because I guarantee you that they have the structure to start a disability caucus. It's probably just dormant or has not been just organized in a really long time. So, you know, if you have other caucuses, then you would just be able to create one.
Yeah.
But and then you would just need to elect, I think, at least in Georgia, I think it's that you need to have quorum of like 5 people to establish a board for a caucus, and you need to be able to vote in like a chair and a vice chair in one more position, I think. I'm not sure, but I'm sure there's bylaws in Arkansas for that exact purpose. You would just need to find out what they are and then have an election.
Okay. I'm
But yeah,
definitely gonna look into that. I
yeah, you
really
should.
am. Yeah, I
Because
would
once
love to
y'all
see
get a disability
something.
caucus, then we can do things together, and then we can get Dom Kelly and New Disabled South, and we can organize the entire Southeast, and it'll be great.
Yes. Yes, and New Disabled South is an awesome account here on Twitter. If you guys wanna check them out, they're always posting some amazing stuff, and
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
we could.
Let me just give some background on New Disabled South because I actually know the founder. So New Disabled South is technically a nonprofit. They do have a PAC branch, but they are separate organizations. But New Disabled South covers disability activism and legislative awareness for the entire Southeast. So they go as far north, I think, as Virginia, and as far west as Texas, and covers everything in between. And the founder of that organization is a guy named Dom Kelly, DOM, Dom Kelly. And he was the disability, I think he was just like the disability, I think he kind of led that group for Stacey Abrams' campaign. He was the disability, I guess, whatever you would call that. Voice
Mhm.
influence, I guess, on her campaign. And that's kind of what threw him into politics. And that's what he's doing now. And he actually just received an award for his for New Disabled South. He won an Eddie Award for the Social Impact Award like 2 weeks ago. And
Awesome.
yeah, it was actually pretty. And he's actually expecting his first child in the next 2 weeks. So,
Oh,
but yeah, he's a very cool individual. New Disabled South is a great organization. Dom actually has CP. I think he's a twin too. So he's a very interesting individual. But yes, check that out if you guys have not already. But that's one thing that I've been trying to pay attention to and keep communicating with him and that group of people, because if all of these states had a disability caucus, that would be great. Because I mean, in Georgia, we only have one for the Democratic Party. We don't have one for the GOP. And so I've been trying to create our caucus to be as nonpartisan as possible to bring in some of our more conservative counterparts. But it's also pretty well known that, if you want something as a disabled person, Republicans aren't going to give it to you. If you want funding for something, or if you want resources for something, a Republican is not going to put that in a budget for you. You're going to have to go ask a Democrat. So it really doesn't make sense to me to have people with disabilities who are part of the Republican Party, but that often comes with lack of awareness. And that's, the whole point of having a nonpartisan caucus, is to just get more people with disabilities involved in politics. Because not only do we not run for office, we don't get involved. We barely vote. I mean, and that's really through no fault of our own, because of voter discrimination and whatnot, and all the barriers that come with everything. But politics itself, I mean, even aside from being in the government, political activism is not accessible to people with disabilities. I mean, the only protests I go to are the ones that I personally plan. So that should tell you about how many protests in America are accessible. Almost none of them. So yeah, we could talk about that too. I could write a book about that, geez. But navigating through a protest with a guide dog is difficult.
right. Yeah, we should definitely do that, especially with Pride Month coming up. I think, all of the different pride parades, it would be great to see them be more accessible, um, so that more people can participate.
Yes, if anybody is part of the LGBTQ community in here, make your pride accessible. Your disabled peers and allies want to be there. So make it accessible. Thank you.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you both so, 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 so much. I enjoyed this conversation. Definitely need to make this a regular thing. This topic needs to be talked about until we're all blue in the face, and until everybody is aware of disability rights and accessibility and not being ableist jerks. Thank you, Madeline, and thank you, Shanoa, and thank you everybody that came and listened. Thank you, April and Ray, for your questions. Those were amazing. Um, I hope you all have a great day, and we will see you again next week. Bye.
Thanks, y'all.